Today I'm sitting down with Frosty to talk about one of his favorite movies, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. We're going to go through the story, the world building, the characters, and the best lines. We'll also explore Peter Jackson's incredible production journey of adapting a beloved book into one of the greatest movie franchises of all time. From the script development to the revolutionary special effects and the minute detail of creating the chainmail armor by hand. But for now, sit back, relax, and welcome to my film club. So Frosty, after you kindly did the first ever episode of Dom's Film Club, I asked you what movie would you like to do, and you chose
The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Absolutely. There are going to be some movies we're going to do in this series where one of them is much bigger than the series and we'll only do that one, The Matrix for example. But there are going to be many iconic franchises where we're going to have to do every single movie. And obviously The Lord of the Rings is near the top of that list. So today we're starting with The Fellowship of the Ring. You could have chosen any movie, any series. Why this one?
This is one of my favourite films of all time, if not my favourite film of all time. And again, similar to our previous episode, it's a childhood film favourite, and the core of the film with the good versus evil, the amount of entertainment value is just so high. There's so much to it. It's the start of an enormous journey with the entire trilogy, and it's one film that I love deeply.
What was your first experience? Did you see so the first one came out that we're talking about today came out in 2001. Did you remember seeing it in the theaters?
Yeah, I must have done, and I would have been 11, so at the right kind of age for a film like this.
But you don't remember specifically seeing it,
I don't have any specific memories of being in the cinema seeing it, but I know that I would have done. And I would have seen it with my dad and brother, who would have been a lot younger. I'm not sure he would have fully got it. And also, having watched it again recently, it's quite scary at points with the villain side of things with the orcs. As an 11-year-old, I feel like I was probably a little bit scared by it. But now watching it again, obviously, it's not something you think of it being a scary film, but
no, it's definitely scary from a kid's point of view, obviously not as a horror. I can't remember if I saw it in the theaters. I think that I would have, but I have a very distinct memory of seeing The Two Towers because for some reason I didn't see it the first week it came out, and then everyone had seen it. Ended up going by myself, and I was by myself in the movie theater, which was an amazing experience to watch The Two Towers in a private movie theater. Yeah. But yeah, this one, I remember having it on VHS, so I did obviously see it fairly soon after it came out, and then I was on board for the rest of the series. I don't think it made as big an impact on me as it did you, clearly. And I think this is what's going to be interesting about our conversation, is that you're someone who was enamored with it from the start and obviously has a close relationship with it. Yeah. I think I'm much more your average person who saw them, who enjoyed them, who rewatches them. Well, I hadn't rewatched them in quite a while until preparing for this, but now watching it as a proper grown-up, I think I have a complete newfound appreciation. Not to rehash the same point, but the last episode we talked about how movies have this hook, how they bring you in with one thing, and then the more you watch them, more you appreciate everything around them. And I'll talk later about the things that I remember liking about The Lord of the Rings and how it's completely different from what I appreciate now. And it is just it's an absolute beast of a movie on every level. From the way it looks, from the story to... I've watched quite a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff, and so I'll be sharing some tidbits from that. But the amount of work that went into making this movie is absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So how many times would you say you've seen The Fellowship of the Rings?
100.
Honestly,
really? It's by far and away the film I've seen the most times. Wow. Not necessarily The Fellowship, the Lord of the Rings trilogy as a whole, but The Fellowship in particular, probably the one I've seen the most.
You watched that one the most?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, this has obviously come up with me. My previous experience with it, so before researching for this, The Two Towers was my favorite. But as I told you earlier, I think, especially once we finish a few years from now, reviewing all three of them, I think I'll have a different view, and I'll give you my verdict once we do that.
Yeah.
But I think for that reason, I've definitely seen The Two Towers a lot more but The Fellowship I've probably seen now probably 5 or 6 times.
Okay, that's not nearly enough.
No, clearly.
To quote one of the lines in the film as well, by the way.
And so, what would be the top line things if someone just said to you at a party, why is it that you like it so much? What would be your bullet points on why you love it? And well, I know that's a...
To be honest, I think that is almost an impossible question to answer. And the fact that it's impossible to answer tells you why I love it so much. In that you talk about hooks, there are so many hooks that it becomes like this beast, as you say. It's like this mega movie with so much going on that hooks me in many different ways. It's not like there's not really a single thing that hooked me in at the very beginning. It was just this very overwhelming, never seen anything like it before, a huge great saga that just blew me away. It was almost to the point where I couldn't take it in. It was almost too much.
So the overwhelming enormity.
Yeah. So to answer your question, no, I can't. I couldn't give you anything.
Here's the thing. Have you read the books?
I have, long time ago.
After seeing the movies. How was that experience?
Slightly weird. It felt like a big slog, and I remember reading them as a 12, 13-year-old, and we used to have something in our school. It was just like a lesson dedicated to just sitting and reading, and I remember reading The Lord of the Rings in those sessions, and at the time I wasn't that bothered by it, and found being forced to read when you didn't really fancy reading made it less enjoyable, and all I really wanted to do was just go out and play football or something. Yeah. So I was not really that bothered by it, and they're so long that I wasn't that engaged in it. And I also remember feeling like this is so different as well that I'm not sure I'm enjoying it that much.
What sort of age were you when you were doing that?
What, about 12.
Right, 13. So just after
pretty soon after, yeah. And I've still got the books now, and what tells you that I read them after the films came out is that the books themselves have the film artwork all over. Yeah. And there's a chance I may have given up as well. I definitely read the first one, and I'm pretty sure I read the second one, but I might have just given up by the time we got to Return of the King, because I would have moved on to other stuff, I think, at that point.
Yeah, well, this is around the time that Harry Potter was a big thing, and that was a lot more accessible for people of our age.
Yeah. Not that I faded off on that hugely. I had to go off on a tangent. I was into the first one and then just felt like I'm going to keep this up, but just faded by the Goblet of Fire. That was too big.
Oh, so you haven't read them all?
No. I lost interest completely.
And The Lord of the Rings, you've never considered going back and reading them as an adult?
I have, but no chance.
You've considered it?
Yeah, I've considered it. No chance that's going to happen.
Fair enough. So, let's say you're at a party and you meet the one person in the world who's never heard of Lord of the Rings, and so you tell them, and they say, okay, you seem enthusiastic, I'll watch the first one. What's it about? How do you answer that question?
Well, this is a difficult question. It's about a story of good versus evil. I think that's the core of it. And in a bit more detail, it's about a underdog that's faced with an enormous task, and with the help of lots of different people, he has to take something and destroy it to save everybody's futures.
Yeah.
If I was trying to be like abstract about it, I could go. The trouble is, there's so much to it that I could spend hours telling them what it's about. But that would be my try not to go into it in too much detail. That would be what I would say.
I mean, I think the beauty of it is that obviously it can become infinitely long. You can read the books, you can go beyond the books. There's all the mythology behind it. You can read the analysis. That you could spend your whole life studying it, and some people have.
Yeah.
Or you could just say it is good versus evil, because that is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to go into it, you would have to say to this one single person, sit down, this might take a while.
I pretty much agree with your description. The IMDb synopsis of The Fellowship of the Ring is A meek hobbit from the Shire and 8 companions set out on a journey to destroy the powerful One Ring and save Middle-earth from the Dark Lord Sauron.
Yeah, okay. Which is, yeah, and that gives you some definitely extra stuff.
Some plot points.
Yeah.
But it is, and we'll go through the story in a few minutes, and again, we could spend hours just talking about the story, but I also think, especially the Fellowship, I think it gets more complicated later on. But the story of the Fellowship, if you boil it down to the important plot points, it is actually fairly straightforward. I mean,
yes, it is,
that synopsis in one sentence pretty much, I mean, it pretty much summarizes a storyline across all 3 movies, because it's the start of the journey of the ring. But yeah, I think that's kind of the beauty of it, because as a kid, when you watch these movies like this, these movies that introduce you to a whole world, it needs to have these layers where you can watch for the first time and say, I enjoyed myself. But then you can watch it for the 100th time and say, I never noticed that that statue is the same one that they show in the flashback.
Which I'm still doing that now.
Sure.
Yeah.
But when you see the amount of work and attention that went into making the movies, it is no surprise, because, these people who were absolutely, obviously the writers like Peter Jackson and his 2 co-writers, as well as they brought in experts who would spend their whole lives studying Tolkien and doing renditions of sculptures and what the characters looked like. But I always think you can't have a movie that's just appealing to those, nerds, for lack of a better term. You do need to have that initial appeal, which obviously it worked. Because you imagine this movie, if the first one hadn't worked and they had 2 more in the can, what an absolute disaster it would have been. And just a tragedy for humanity.
Yeah.
Which takes me nicely to a bit of the background for the movie. So it came out in 2001, and for those of you that don't know, it is based on the novel The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, which came out in 1954. So we all know it as the 3 books. He had originally intended for it to be 1 book in 2 volumes, but for publishing purposes and stuff, they released it in the 3 books, and that's the format we know it in today. It wasn't an immediate hit, the book. It was kind of a sleeper hit. And obviously back then, books came out in pieces, in newspapers and stuff like that, and then the word of mouth was a lot slower than it was today. Nothing was going viral, but it did gradually become hugely popular. There were Tolkien clubs, and by the end of the 20th century, it's considered, I don't know the exact facts on this, but it's considered the most popular book of the 20th century, behind only one other book. Do you want to guess what that is? It's usually, whenever they do this stat, it's always second after.
I don't know. It could be all sorts of things.
The Bible.
Oh,
yeah. I think they say that about Harry Potter as well. That is the most, popular book of the...
I was going to say Catch-22.
No. So basically, of original stuff that was written in the 20th century, it was considered the most popular book. So the trilogy was shot simultaneously over about 26 months. Sometimes they say 15 months, but I think that's how long certain actors were on set. The exact dates that are given from the beginning to the wrap adds up to about 26 months. And they did a couple of pickup shots, so, just reshooting a couple of angles here or there. But apart from that, they shot all 3 movies in that period of time, which is crazy. Apparently, that's how long it took to shoot Apocalypse Now, 1 movie in that period of time. So the efficiency, when I was watching the behind the scenes, the way Peter Jackson was running this, he had 3, 4, 5 different camera units all over New Zealand that were filming lots of stuff. Apparently, they said if they'd filmed it with just 1 unit, it would probably take them 5 or 6 years just to shoot it. And that's just shooting. That doesn't include any of the special effects.
Yeah.
It doesn't include any of the prep before. Apparently, stuff like the production design, just preparing the Hobbit town, took 1.5 years for them to just find the place and build it and everything. So just so much work, and we'll get into that in much more detail. It was obviously a massive success. The series grossed almost $3 billion on a budget of under $300 million, so 10 times more. The success of the 3 was actually very similar. So Fellowship grossed $888 million, the next one $938, and the next one $1.1. So understandably some slight increases, but it isn't like, the second one doubled the budget of the first one. So very much a big hit from the beginning. Do you want to guess the Rotten Tomatoes score?
90%.
92%, so from the critics, which is actually the lowest of the 3. The second one got 95%, the third one got 94%. They're basically all, very well reviewed. Interestingly, though, on IMDb, and I think this is where IMDb is more interesting when you're really talking about, top-notch films.
Yes.
So, do you want to guess again?
I know that they're all right up there in the IMDb top 250.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, which was a long time ago. I think The Return of the King is highest of the three, and The Fellowship is the second highest, I think.
Yes, you're correct.
And it's knocking around the high 8s. It's like 8.9 or something.
So Two Towers is at 8.8. Then Fellowship is at 8.9 and is number 9 on the all-time list. And then Return of the King is at 9.0, I believe, at number 6.
Okay.
So they are all three very much in the top.
I
can't remember how much Two Towers is at, but they're all three of them considered among the best movies of all time.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I wouldn't necessarily agree with Return of the King being the best, but I'm sure people would argue with that.
I think it's the whole same thing as with the Oscars, how they were nominated a lot for the first two, but then they didn't really win a bunch until the last one. And I think by the last one, they were like, this is our last chance to really give them their props. Yeah. So I think probably the same with the reviews. So in terms of box office, it was only the second biggest movie, both worldwide and the US that year. Can you want to guess what it was?
Of 2001?
Yeah. What was ahead of it? Only by a bit.
No, I don't.
Give you a hint.
Harry Potter.
Yeah, the first Harry Potter. But it is another thing that blows my mind, especially when you consider the difficult landscape of film these days. The fact that obviously they're very different, but the fact is they are both fantasy adaptations of very popular book. The fact that both of them came out the same year. Yeah. Maybe they came out different times of year.
I do remember there being like a little bit of a rivalry thing at the time.
Not surprised. Maybe the age groups were a bit different because, I mean, even though you and I saw it, I feel like it's probably kids that were a few years older than us were probably more into Lord of the Rings, and our age younger was probably more into Harry Potter. But I think generally our age, we saw both.
Yeah, I saw the first Harry Potter and it just didn't click with me at all. I don't know why, because I like fantasy magic stuff, but maybe because of Lord of the Rings, I was just like, well, that's so much better.
It's a much more mature take on this sort of thing.
It's like the 11-year-old 2000s version of Blur versus Oasis.
That's quite the analogy. Last question before the spoiler line. Who would you recommend this film to? I think it's fair to assume that people will already watched it. But for someone says, Frosty, what movie should I watch this weekend? What sort of mood or what sort of film would they have to be in the mood for you to say, watch The Fellowship?
I tell you what, it's great for like a bank holiday weekend, Christmas, Easter, that sort of thing. In terms of who, I'd say it's definitely for kids around the age of 10 plus. I don't know what the rating is. It's probably like
PG-13, I think, because they actually, despite it being seemingly gory, there isn't actually that much blood. It's just a lot of bloodless killing.
Yeah, it's somewhere between the really childish fighting and the serious one. It's like hits a nice little sweet spot where it's a lot of like death, but it's, you don't think of it as being like too gory. So anyone of that kind of age, and any time for kids, but if you're an adult and you've never seen it, you want to watch it, it's a good like holiday type film.
Yeah, what you're saying is you need time, whether you're watching one, but here's the thing, if you watch one and you have any taste in movie, you're gonna want to watch the second, and then you're gonna want to watch the third.
That's right. Maybe a nice wintry day, it's rainy outside, just get a nice hot cup of tea or something and stick it on.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation. So we've already talked a little bit of things, and I'm pretty sure no one is going to be listening or watching this without having any clue. But for the sake of consistency, we're now going to draw the spoiler line. So from now on, we're going to discuss everything from, the characters, their backstories, what happens at the end, what happens in the other movies, and so on. So if for some reason you're not completely clear on the plot or you don't want to have the spoilers, we recommend pausing right now, going ahead, watching The Fellowship of the Rings, and then coming back to us. You've already touched upon the forms of entertainment that it has. So it's IMDb has it categorized as adventure, epic, fantasy, action, drama. So they really throw a wide net. And I mean, those are all pretty spot on.
The only thing I would add to that, and it does it really, really well, is the comedy is really good. Like there are certain lines in there that are very funny.
I agree.
It's obviously not a comedy, but...
No. I mean, if you're going to put 5 genres, you might as well.
Yeah, it does deserve a little bit of credit in that regard.
Absolutely. When you first watched it, which one of those types of entertainment do you remember really catching you or hooking you? Or do you just remember, like you were saying before, of having just everything?
Probably everything as a whole. If I were to pick something out, probably the action above all else, particularly the specific scenes that are built around fighting, which grow and grow as the trilogy moves on. But the first introduction to the action, those scenes are probably the bits that I would have gone back to when I first watched it. Obviously, it's a different experience now. I'm much more interested in the whole thing and looking at the little nitty-gritty details of stuff.
Yeah, so I'm the exact same, and this is why The Two Towers was my favorite.
Yeah, I get that.
The battle scene there, which is pretty much an hour.
Helm's Deep
Yeah, is just iconic. Amazing, iconic. Yeah. It's amazing, and I think maybe that's why I sort of said this is what I like about The Lord of the Rings. Yeah, and then I would rewatch The Fellowship and say there's not nearly the same scale of battle. And
no,
I think
that's absolutely right. However, I would say that I know we're going to talk about specific scenes later, but whilst we're talking about battle scenes, the Aemon Hen scene, which is effectively the bit at the end where they're fighting in the forest, that to me is arguably my favourite battle scene of the whole thing. It's so well shot, looking at it with a more critical eye now, and I have a very soft spot for things in forests, and the New Zealand landscape really sings in that particular scene.
Yeah, because Helm's Deep, there is no landscape. It is just dark and rocky and wet. Yeah. So yeah, you don't have any of that.
It's a bit like I've referenced Robin Hood in the last film. Again, it's like some of that is filtering into why I'm enjoying it so much. And it's also the scene where you're really seeing the actual Fellowship all together, Gandalf aside, fighting in their own separate way. So it's the first time you're introduced to like everybody together in this kind of moving fighting scene. That's the other thing I like about it, is that it moves. It's not just everyone just bashing it out in one place. There's movement to it.
Because technically in Moria they do fight together against the troll, but it is again, the backdrop isn't nearly as pleasant to look at as the forest.
Yeah, that's a good point about Moria. That is when watching it again the other day. There were realizations for me, trying to think back to what it would have been like the first time. That is the point where you see Legolas and the arrows and like, oh wow, he's so good with the bow, and Gimli and the axe and stuff. Because up until that point, you don't really know what these guys are up to.
Yeah, I think the one very important part of the movie is opening with the prologue with that battle scene, because obviously that is very much the type of action you're going to see in Two Towers and Return of the King. But I think it is. And they knew what they were doing. They realized, Peter Jackson said, if we just started with 40 minutes of Hobbitland, people are going to be walking out of the theaters. So you start with this action scene about the guys. If you keep watching, you're going to see more of it. And then they just, over the trilogy, they just escalate it. And now you get Moria, which, that's good. It's impressive, the special effects. The great thing about Aemon Hen as well is that it's real fighting.
Yes.
It is stuntmen and the actors, and it's real. I don't even know if there were any, I'm sure there's the odd shot, but there were basically no special effects. Whereas obviously in Moria, the troll is all special effects, and all the battle scenes afterwards, where they have tens of thousands, are very heavy on the special effects, which is great. But I think that is one, when you revisit the Fellowship, you can appreciate that it feels so much more real, because it 100%, is. And it's so much more personal. In all of the others, it's tens of thousands and special effects, and you kind of, maybe you see Aragorn or Legolas in the middle of it, but it's just this army of orcs. Whereas here, obviously you have the orcs, but you actually know one of the orcs, the leader of them. So there is still that thing. And then obviously with Boromir dying is extremely personal. And it's a much more detail-oriented fight scene than the rest of the series.
Yeah, and again, going back to me thinking about watching this film for the first time, and it being a little bit different to the usual, you're not really expecting Boromir to die. You don't expect to see your main character die in what you I think at the time you would have known this is one film of more to come.
Yeah.
It was a bit like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, but I guess now the joke about Sean Bean dying is like such a thing. But obviously, this is before Game of Thrones as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even learn our lesson. I remember being shocked when he dies in the first season of Game of Thrones, but we should have known.
Yeah, that's his thing.
Apparently, he said that this was his favorite death of all of his characters.
I mean, it is a really good. That's another good point about the this particular scene, is that his death is fucking brilliant. The 3 arrows and the fact that he keeps on going, it's so good. He's great at dying.
He's good, the best. Apparently, in the behind the scenes, they said that they spent basically a day shooting the scene between him and Aragorn about him dying in his arms, and they shot it in the morning, and then they broke for lunch. And so, they go for lunch in costumes and stuff, and how weird it was to just be like chatting around lunch, and they're like, okay, let's go back to film my death. So I think the other things about the entertainment is just that, exactly what you said. You kind of need to just prepare yourself for this tidal wave of just everything, of story, of the landscapes, of music. Stuff happening. The music. Oh, we'll talk about the music later. But okay, since you brought it up, I'll preface this because I've been preparing for Harry Potter and other series that we're going to do. And I think the thing that's crazy about the music is that all the other things, you have something to work off. You can work off the page. There were artists, and obviously Tolkien wrote the books. Tolkien provided a lot of drawings and maps, and then people based on those did paintings of what the characters looked like, and the costume designers went off that. Can you imagine being the music person for one of these movies? You have nothing to go off. They just say, read these books. We need music that's going to give us the vibe of this. Yeah. And you just start from scratch. It's crazy.
It's amazing.
And it's so iconic.
It's so iconic. You immediately think of the film when you hear it.
Like,
and
notes.
It's almost as if multiple scores for a single film have been created, because every style of scene and type of character has a very distinct sound. You've got a sound for the Shire, which is starkly different to the sound for Isengard. And they perfectly capture the essence of each of those places and what it means. Like the Shire is such a like homely place, such a place of comfort. It makes you think of your own home, and the noise of that flute or whatever it is, it just immediately, it makes you almost instinctively homesick. It's just so good. And
you hear the drums of Isengard, you get filled with dread.
It's so good. It's like, it is one of the driving forces of what makes the film so good. And obviously it continues through the whole trilogy, and it just builds and evolves. It's just I think my favourite film score is so good.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of others that have done similar things, but I can't think of anything that was better with that. And as you say, how they all intertwine while being different, yet clearly belong to the same world. But yeah, so if you're watching this, you buckle up for so much story, so much beauty, so much musical stimulation. And the other thing I think I guess this falls into entertainment. It's the fact that you're being introduced to this world where you can watch the 3 movies. Like, this is me before. You can watch the 3 movies and say, this is interesting. I get that there is 10,000 pages of detail, but you're not everyone is going to want to know about that. But then for all the people who say, no, I now want to read the books, and you read it and you get so much detail on every single character, every single detail. And then if you want even more than that, you can read the history and the analysis beyond Tolkien.
You can really get into it if you want to.
Well, he basically spent, he apparently basically spent his life creating the world of Middle-earth.
Yeah, I mean, there's like an entire language that he's basically made up.
Yeah, the Elvish language, right? Yeah, he made that up. Apparently, linguistics was his kind of first love. And then, when he started the story of Middle-earth, it was because he had a desire to create a British mythology, because he had this very strong belief that there was no such thing as true British mythology, because everything that with mythology, you think of Nordic countries and stuff, but even apparently stuff like King Arthur, which you think of as British, it's not. It's based on myths from other countries. So he felt this was something that was missing in British culture, so this was his version of that.
That is interesting. It does feel like I don't really understand why, but it does feel like a British thing, even though there are American actors in it and stuff. It just feels close to home.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was written by a British person. The hobbits are very much meant to look like kind of British farmers and stuff like that. The costumes are based on that. Their accents are obviously, they're not using American accents or anything. They're using I wouldn't call them British. Well, they are the Hobbits.
It's the closest to.
Yeah. Proper English.
And you've got. I mean, the Shire is something you would associate with Wiltshire. For example.
And then I guess the last piece of entertainment that we talked about before was the humor, and I think that's it's by far not the most important thing, and I'm not saying it wouldn't work without it, but I think each movie I watched in the last couple of weeks. I've watched This Fellowship twice, and I've watched The Two Towers. I'm going to be rewatching The Return of the King soon, but I haven't. But in The Fellowship of the Ring, Merry and Pippin are clearly the comic relief. I mean, obviously they existed in the books and stuff, and I'm sure there was a lot more to their characters, but that's their role here, is just to be funny, and they're very good at it.
Yeah.
In Two Towers, it's very much Legolas and Gimli's relationship, which is them digging each other. Yeah. But it's an important, charming part of these movies is that in the middle of all of this, despair and it's the end of the world, you can have just a funny joke about eating.
Yeah. It plays a really important role, because without that, it becomes quite a serious thing, and they chuck in those little lines that just lifts it a little bit. It adds a lot of brevity to it.
It shows that it's not taking itself too seriously.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because there is, because I think if it wasn't it's not self-deprecating, but if there wasn't that lightheartedness, it would be a bit silly. Because come on, you've got these little people that are taking this ring. Yeah. They're walking barefoot in these marshes. There's a giant wizard with a silly hat on, and you kind of need that humor to be like. And you see behind the scenes that they were having obviously it was very, very hard, but they were having fun and there was true love and stuff. And I think it really does reflect the atmosphere on the set and of making this movie of hard work, but also love and fun is kind of reflected in what happens on screen. And it's a fun part as well. So the story, I was surprised. I was able to manage to get it down to a reasonable number of bullet points about what actually happens in it. And so we'll go through those just to remind anyone who might not have watched this movie in a while. And we'll go through some of our favorite scenes. You told me some of yours, but they seem to actually, at least three of them are quite concentrated in one part of the movie.
Yeah, the pace of the film, I think, is one of the things that makes it so good. It's so well paced, and as you say, it's like an introduction to a world. The way in which they take their time with introducing you to each of the different characters works really, really well. And there are scenes that are like stitched together that overlap, that feel like a big section. And the one in particular is the sort of introduction to Strider that then bleeds into introduction to the ring wraiths and all that chasing, and they're in the pub and all that. That whole bit that goes on for quite a while is just so good.
Yeah, well, that's the part I was referring to. There's a lot of your favorite scenes. So it starts off with the prologue. And so my understanding here, this wasn't absolutely not in the books, but Peter Jackson said we need to get people in. Yeah. So they kind of give sense. The sense I get is that these are things that are explained. It's very much like with Game of Thrones, how they follow a story, but then they keep doing flashbacks to explain history and stuff. So this is probably stuff that was explained later on in the books. But it very much introduces the ring, the history of the ring, Sauron, what happened to the ring, and basically 3,000 years of history leading up to the beginning of the movie. Then we meet Bilbo, we meet Frodo, we meet Gandalf, and then to a lesser extent Sam, Merry, and Pippin. And then, they spend 30, 40 minutes kind of setting all this up. And obviously, given that Frodo is going to be the most important character, it's very important to get that background. And then, the mission is set. Here's a fun thing, how Gandalf, once he becomes aware of the ring, and then he goes off, does his research, comes back. Apparently in the book, between the time Gandalf becomes aware of the ring and then the time Frodo leaves the Shire, 17 years elapses. Apparently it goes into detail of him selling his house and stuff like that. So that's just kind of the level of detail you get from the book. Yeah. So I watched the extended version most recently, and I expected it to feel dragged out, and it doesn't, because it's just adding 30 seconds here, 40 seconds there, just giving you more detail. And it is, I think no one should start with the extended version, but if you want to know more stuff, watch the extended version. The thing, though, is that it does drag out the entire runtime to over 3.5 hours. And actually, the discs I have, you needed to change discs, and it actually stops right after the council of Rivendell.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize, because we watched it in 2 days, that actually the beginning up until the end of that is pretty much almost a self-contained movie with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a culmination and stuff. And then the second half as well is basically the Fellowship of the Ring. But anyway, they get the mission. Then Gandalf meets Saruman, that betrayal, and then the first encounter. Yeah, the first encounter with the Wraiths, the Nazgul. So that is before they meet Stryker. Apparently, so the scene, on the path where they go down and stuff, that was the first scene that was shot of the entire trilogy.
Wow.
You say that was your first scene that you pointed out that really liking it. Is that where they explain who they are as well, the Nazgul?
No, the point at which the Nazgul are explained is when Aragorn / Strider at this point is in the Prancing Pony pub, right, or whatever, with all the hobbits upstairs, and they've made it all the way to Bree.
Yes.
And they're about to, what you think, and again, this is where at the time watching it for the first time you're thinking, oh no, this is
gonna
it,
be a short movie.
So they're all there with the swords about to, what you think is kill all the hobbits, but it turns out that Strider's done something clever and they've hidden off in somewhere else and set a bit of a trap. And it's at that point where you hear the scream, which is one of the iconic noises, that he then explains the whole thing with them. But they once were men, and they were all given rings and fell to the greed and everything. So they're neither living nor dead. Is how he puts it, I think.
And so you also talked about you're a big fan of the introduction of Strider.
Yeah, because it's part of a wider scene. I'm a big fan of pubs, as you well know, and the Prancing Pony, I think, is one of the great pub appearances in film history. So Strider is in the pub, sat in the corner in a very cool looking, hood down, dimly lit, smoking a pipe. It just looks cool, and you're obviously wondering, who the hell is this guy? And then the way in which he sort of appears and drops one of the most iconic lines from the film, when he picks up Frodo after Frodo's put on the ring, takes him upstairs, and he asks him, are you frightened? Frodo says yes, and he says, not nearly frightened enough. Yeah. Which is such a great line. So that whole sequence, the way that it just builds and builds and builds from that point all the way up until the point where at this point it's Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin and Strider all atop this like old ancient ruin.
Yeah, the Battle of Weathertop.
The Battle of Weathertop, where the Ringwraiths find them, and Aragorn has this epic moment with the fire. That's where you're suddenly like, oh, okay, this guy's cool. Like, yeah. We weren't sure about him. He could have been a bad guy, but he's clearly like a badass.
Here's a question: why was he in the Prancing Pony?
One might purport that he knew about what was happening and placed himself there, thinking that he might need to get involved. I've absolutely no idea.
Because I googled it, and the answer, I found a YouTube short that said that he had a pre-existing relationship with Gandalf, and that Gandalf, because obviously they were supposed to meet Gandalf there, and that Gandalf would have brought him in.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's why he was there, which makes sense. Maybe it's something that's explained more in the book, but it is... Yeah, I did wonder that. But do you know if he knew Gandalf before, or is there any indication? Because him and Legolas clearly knew each other before.
Yeah, it's very subtly alluded to, I would guess, but no, it's not made obvious. So
yeah, I think as you say, from the time they meet him, pretty much until they get to Rivendell, it is very much non-stop. That's probably like a 30-40 minute of the movie.
Yeah. What I said earlier about watching it again and again and again, and always noticing new things. I wonder about when it's either just before Weathertop or after that they're all in a little forested area, and I swear you can see the trolls set in stone, which I think is either the Hobbit have like retrospectively added that in to link the films together, or it was because I'm sure part of the story of the Hobbit is these trolls are set in stone.
Oh, right.
And that you can see them in the background, and that was just a moment of, I've never noticed those, which is I mean, I should.
But
really notice.
they're definitely trolls that have turned to stone and not statues.
Yeah.
Because there's that thing Bilbo tells the story about the troll at the beginning at the party about the trolls turning to stone.
Yes. It's There's lots of layers if you're looking hard enough.
One fun fact is that the Battle of Weathertop, I think that was Viggo Mortensen's first battle scene, and we'll talk about it more in the characters or actors, but he basically was brought in very last minute, so he hadn't really had any proper training, or he'd had very minimal. But much like Antonio Banderas in The Mask of Zorro, apparently once he started his training, he was a natural, and they said he was one of the best swordsmen they'd ever had.
He's brilliant. That fight scene, he doesn't do a huge amount.
No, but it's a lot of
like
very cool.
Throwing the
torch and
the torch, and obviously the way it ends with the throw, it's spin into the face. The other thing about the ring wraiths is that you're introduced to them quite early on, and it's just the way in which you're slowly finding out about them and just the pure evil, the little details they add in, like you're introduced to them in the most intimate way is when Frodo, Sam, Merry and Pippin all fall onto the road, and Frodo has that moment of realization of get off the road. They all hide underneath the tree root. The ringwraith turns up, and he's like sniffing around, peering over, and there's little bugs and stuff all crawling. Those little details just add to the pure evil of these things. And I think one of the reasons why the Fellowship is my favourite is that the ringwraiths are one of the most iconic and powerful characters of the whole thing. When they go on those weird dragon things in the second and third films, they lose some of the essence for me. The purity of the black cloak, no face, black knight of armour stuff underneath on a horse is far more powerful for me than the weird flying dragon thing. It just felt wrong to me, and it just took away from the power of those characters.
Here's a question. Obviously them I understand, so they were the kings that were given the the rings, and they were corrupted, and they're neither dead nor alive, enslaved to the ring. Get all of that. The horses. Are the horses dead? Because they have red eyes and they have blood everywhere. Are they like zombie horses?
I don't know. Never thought about it. I'm gonna say yeah.
So I agree that the ring wraiths are very cool, like they're very iconic, they look amazing, great design, but I have questions about their competence.
Oh yeah, completely. I mean,
they're pretty shit at their jobs.
You have to have these questions about the entirety of all of the evil characters, because when you get to the fight scenes, it's especially Eamon Hen as an example, it's like a few people against what seems to be hundreds and hundreds of these fuckers, and why are they so bad? I
mean, that one I kind of see orcs very much like stormtroopers in Star Wars, where you accept that they're just the shitty the shitty troops that they're gonna get through a lot of them, but the ring wraith is supposed to be these kind of boss level baddies. True. And to be honest, it's not even the fight thing. I'm fine with that, but it's the fact that they're literally under their nose when they first find them. Then you know what, they get tricked by the thing in Bree. That's fine. But the one in particular that gets me is when they're chasing them before the ferry, and Frodo is right there. He's right there, and then they're chasing them. And then they're hobbits. They are 4 foot tall, and they manage to outrun them on their horses.
Yeah, I guess the only thing you could argue is that because it's in quite a dense forest, they've managed to escape by being more nimble. A big chunky horse is maybe going to struggle to get through the trees. I don't know, but it is a good point. It's one that I've brushed over every single time.
It doesn't ruin it for me, but it is just it is funny because, as you say, on the one hand they are supposed to be so big and scary, but you're like, quite easy to get away from them.
Yeah, that's true. It is true.
Oh, you were talking about the funny bits, like the bit where they're on right before the Weathertop fight, and Frodo wakes up and they're making breakfast.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we got sausages, eggs, the tomatoes, you want some? I find that bit so funny. About half of the humor is food based. It's about the second breakfast.
What about second breakfast? That's a good bit to pick up on though, because there is a part of me that just finds Merry and Pippin so annoying. But they're there for a reason. They're there to create jeopardy.
Yeah,
but they're so annoying.
I found that a lot more this time, because I think that as kids we like those characters because they're funny and we can relate to them and they're silly like us. But then when you're there and you're trying to have a serious adventure, it kind of feels like they're getting in the way.
Yeah.
The bit where later on when Mary, in Moria, when pushes the thing down, that bit is just...
That's agonizing, because by that point, he's already given away Frodo's identity in the pub.
Yeah.
He's already lit a fire atop a hill that's made it obvious where they all are, but just before he does touch the skeleton, he's already like,
and he was throwing the rocks in the water to wake up the Kraken.
So he's already done all this stuff, and you think, oh, for fuck's sake, mate, come on. Yeah, and at that point, obviously, they need something to set up the whole scene. Maybe they could have done without it being him again, because you at this point you're like, oh mate, you're an idiot, you're so annoying. What are you doing?
Yeah, because I feel like Pippin is part of that, but it is very much Merry that always does the really dumb stuff.
Is it the right way around? I get the two names.
No, I think you got it right. Merry's the one that does all the silly stuff, and Pippin's usually...
No, I think it's the other way around.
Oh, Pippin. Well, which one's Dominic Monaghan?
Merry.
Oh, okay, then it's the other way around.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's... Yeah. They are the characters that you care about least, for sure, and you tend to brush over a lot of the scenes they're in, except for it drags on way too long, but in the Two Towers, the whole thing with the Ents.
Yeah, they become much more serious characters from the second one on.
Yeah, they have a much more important role as it develops. But the Ents bit I do like, when the Ents charge on Isengard.
Yeah, I love that scene.
It's great.
But back to the Fellowship. So after the Battle of Weathertop, Frodo gets stabbed. Arwen turns up, saves him, takes him to Rivendell. There's that epic horse scene with the Nazgul. Apparently she, Liv Tyler, wasn't allowed to ride the actual horse. So every time you see her, she's actually on the back of a truck riding some like hairy stuff. And they had the Nazgul like riding behind her and stuff. It looks really funny. Then we have Rivendell. So I think that's our real first big view of elfish culture and architecture and stuff, which is very visually stunning.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And then the council meeting, the center of the movie.
Yeah, it's effectively the start of the whole film proper, as it were.
Yeah, everything there is just kind of the setup for that. Yeah, apparently in the book that scene is even longer than it is in the film. It took them 5 days to shoot it. They had to shoot it indoors because they needed to control everything. But I think they talked about how they're rewriting the script constantly throughout. And apparently this was one of the hardest scenes because, it could have been 40 minutes, but then you needed to condense it and stuff. But I do think they do a pretty good job because it doesn't feel rushed. It feels like you get a lot of information. It sets up the Fellowship perfectly.
Yeah. There's great little moments in it as well, like the moment where you hear Frodo muffled saying, I will take it, or whatever, and Gandalf hears him.
Yeah,
the look on his face is so good. It's that realization that he knows that the only way is for Frodo to do it, and he knows what it's going to entail and do to him. It's a very powerful moment, which is just a tiny little part of the film.
But he can't be that surprised because he's the one that set all this up. I totally understand why Gandalf can't pick it up. The thing about because he's so powerful, it would be dangerous, totally makes sense. But when you rewatch it, the beginning about how he basically sort of forces Frodo to, pick it up and stuff like that, you do feel as though, what are you doing to this poor guy? He just wanted to live his life.
Yeah.
One thing on that, actually, this is probably good a time as any. I feel like when you've watched this the first couple of times, I think Bilbo doesn't come across a particularly good character because, he's mischievous, he's using the ring in the wrong way. Obviously, he has that moment at Rivendell when he tries to take it back. But on rewatch, again, once you rewatch it a bunch of times and you understand the full thing and then you understand the history, the fact is Bilbo gave up the ring, and obviously he wasn't... Gandalf very much pushed him, but he was already planning on doing it. And when you consider the power of the ring and what it did to Gollum, because if he had kept it for 500 years like Gollum, he basically would have become like Gollum, right?
Yeah.
It's the fact that he kept it for a reasonable amount of time. I think about 50 years is the idea that he carried it.
Yep.
And yeah, on reflection, he's actually a really strong character. The fact that he gives it up.
Yeah.
And because he gives up immortality.
Yeah.
Just to kind of live out his days in a normal way.
Yeah. I think he obviously realizes it's done him bad.
I mean, how had it done him bad at the beginning of the movie? He got to play around with it and be invisible and live forever. He didn't have a concrete reason to give it up, other than the fact that he accepted that he needed to die like a normal mortal.
Yeah, true.
Because at that point he's not aware of the whole mission to destroy it or anything like that. It's not as though he gives it up for it to be destroyed. No. He gives it up from a.
I think you get the sense that he realizes that it has a hold on him.
Right.
If you were looking into it in more detail, you could argue that it's like there's underlying connotations with addiction.
Oh yeah, I mean it's very much.
It's really powerful in when you look at it through that lens. So he's obviously wrestling with it. He understands that it's not good for him, even though he's like got this weird relationship with it.
Yeah, but no one else in the history of the ring ever gave it up voluntarily. Every single time, usually you died and it was taken away from you.
Yep.
Gollum lost it because he's really clumsy. But anyway, so that takes us nicely back to Rivendell, so where he sees Bilbo again. Council meeting.
Yeah.
Fellowship sets off. That's one of those. I can't remember how you feel the first time, but when the Fellowship gets set up for the first time, like everyone says, an elf, a dwarf, and a man, and then the music blares, and you're just like, oh, here we go.
In that little sequence, you've got some of the most iconic bits. The line about "you have my sword, and my axe and my bow." That's something that is stands out as an iconic line. And then as they set off, you've got one of the maybe the introduction to the landscape and the vastness of the world when the music kicks in as well with the dun, 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 and they're all walking through this little gap in the rocks. One by one, the characters pass through. It's, I would say that's my favourite 10 seconds of the whole trilogy. Is that moment?
That's a big statement.
It's just so good because it gives you that massive kick of here we go, because you know what's coming, and it's the start of the whole thing where your excitement levels are peaked.
It does actually, so they peak, and then I feel like it does, but for good reason. It does kind of stall after that, especially in the extended version, because basically then they try a couple of different routes and they get stopped. I think in the normal version, did they go straight up the mountain? Because in the extended, they're going a much easier bit, but then the Saruman's
the
crows turn up. I don't think that's in the theatrical version.
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, but so they can't go that way. So then they go up the mountain. Then Saruman tries to bring the mountain down on them there.
Yeah.
And then that's when they end up going to Moria.
Yeah.
But I think one way or another in the extended, they kind of drag that out by an extra few minutes. So again, it's part of the pacing of the movie of like, okay, we're on the adventure and now we're stuck and stuff, and we need to go different ways. And then you have Moria, which, the ultimate stalling is they can't get in. About trying to find the password and stuff.
Across those little sequences as well, as much as they are a bit slower paced, it's where you're starting to get to know the characters more, and it's where my favourite of the Fellowship is Legolas by quite some way. It's the things like the fact that he can see really far away, and as those weird birds are turning up, he's the one that can see them in the distance. And then when they're on the mountain, he's walking on the snow. It's just stuff like that I just fall for immediately.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about the characters later on. But when I watched them as a kid, Legolas was my favorite character as well. Yeah. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think he's very much primed for younger people.
Yeah.
So then they end up in Moria, the troll battle. So that's kind of our first, apart from the beginning. But again, the beginning is on such a big scale that you're not really getting a sense of what the orcs and the goblins are and stuff.
Yeah.
So Moria is that first encounter with them. Although actually no, they're not orcs. Are they all goblins?
Goblins.
They're all goblins. Does the blue swords, is it for goblins and orcs?
It's just for orcs. It's just for anything evil, I think.
I think it was meant to be, because I think orcs and goblins are somehow related from like their breeding or something. Apparently one of the because this movie is obviously, there's so much going on. Have you ever looked on IMDb, the goofs, like things that have been done slightly wrong? But one of them is apparently the blue sword. There's lots of times when there are orcs around and it doesn't actually, they forget to shine it up. And this is the first huge use of again, apart from the prologue, the huge CGI with the troll, which apparently was an absolute nightmare to film because they basically have to do everything without having the troll there.
Yeah.
And then, there's basically, I don't know how long it lasts, but it must be a good 20-30 minutes from the beginning, the first time the arrow gets shot at Boromir, all the way until they get out. Because then obviously we've got the fall of Gandalf, which is a huge turning point in the movie.
Yeah, and again, it's rewatching it, imagining myself watching it the first time. You're not expecting that at all. You're really not expecting, not least that early in the film, but the whole trilogy. You're thinking, surely not. And I remember after the first one had come out and we were all like desperately waiting for the next one to come, there was so much talk about, is Gandalf coming back? And someone's heard that they've read the book and he actually comes. But I hadn't, and you were like, I don't believe it. He died.
I have no recollection of the period between the two about thinking stuff like that. But it is always funny to think when, because obviously Game of Thrones was different because the show outpaced it. Or with Harry Potter, for example, when people would say, I don't know what's going to happen. And people who read the book are like, guys, you can find out. You can just read the books. We're like, no, we're just going I'll just wait for the movie. But I remember being very excited when he comes back in the second one.
Big time.
So I have the answer to this. So this isn't a test. It's to know if you know. Do you understand the history of Moria and why the orcs were there and how long they'd been there? Because
not really, but I would imagine there must be some overlap with the timeline of The Hobbit.
So my big thing was I think at first glance you might think that Saruman sent the orcs because he does say that he knows they're going to go to Moria to kind of take it over, to trap them there. But the thing is, all the bodies of dwarves and stuff, that they've obviously been dead for a really long time.
Yeah.
So that's years at the very least before the beginning of the movie that all of this has happened.
Yeah.
But then the other question is, how come Gimli didn't know? Because he's like, we should go to Moria.
Yeah,
if it had been
did
years.
Have this thought.
So I've done the research and I think I have the answer. So Moria used to be this bastion of dwarf culture. So Gandalf alludes to this, and I think the elves do as well, that they got too greedy and they dug too deep in the earth and they unleashed the Balrog, who came and basically maybe not destroyed their civilization, but was a big problem. If you can imagine, that thing is just walking around. And then there was one of the wars that took place hundreds of years before where the orcs and the goblins came in and basically exterminated the dwarves. But then, and this does connect to The Hobbit, there's his cousin, Gimli's cousin, who apparently is one of the characters in The Hobbit. They were sent to recolonize Moria, and redevelop it as another stronghold. And apparently, obviously, they didn't have the internet or anything, so it takes a while for information to get around. That expedition had been sent years before, and nothing had been heard from them. Apparently, in the books, it's Gandalf that's just going through Moria, and Gimli is actually more cautious. For some reason, they reversed that in there. So his cousin had been sent, and he was hoping that they had come and they had recolonized it and everything was going to be fine. But obviously when they get there, it seems that expedition had failed, and that now it's obviously the Balrog is what rules it, but there's also a bunch of orcs and goblins that just kind of live there and around because they are just kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
And once you read all of that, as a perfect example of something that's not going to bother you the first time, but having rewatched it, I was like, there's a couple of things that don't make sense. And then you read all of that and you go, okay, well, that makes sense. And it's those threads that someone might then say, okay, well, because I actually I haven't watched all 3 Hobbit movies. I think I
don't need to. Honestly, it's way too strung out.
Yeah, because it's one short book that's strung out into 3 movies. Yeah. But I feel like I should watch them at least, because I think I watched the first one and then maybe half of the second or something.
Yeah, there's just nothing compared to the Lord of the Rings.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, so that's just an example of a thread that if someone gets curious, you can then go in and you can read a few lines like I did, or you can then go read The Hobbit and you can then read like the backstory about, this war that happened at this point and stuff. Because there's so much stuff. I don't actually know what format it is, but there's just thousands of pages from Tolkien of him just explaining the history of this war that took place 1,000 years ago, just because he wants to explain this one particular plot point in the Fellowship and stuff. And because he never really finished the last book that was published. Was another a Middle-earth book, and it actually was published after his death by his son, and it was just more history of all of this. So he spent his literal entire life building up this mythology, and we didn't even get to read it all in the end. So Moria, troll battle, Gandalf falls. Then after that, while they're grieving, they run into Galadriel, who I was trying to figure out what is the purpose. I mean, again, it's in the book sometimes, so that's just the answer. It's in the book. But what is the purpose of that encounter in your mind?
Yeah, I was asking myself the same questions. It's one of the bits of the film where you think this is probably why people don't rate it as their number one. My take was that she's there to give Frodo a bit of a warning and also some hope to say this is going to be difficult, but you can do it effectively. I don't really know why we as a viewer need to see that. It did feel a bit like because Galadriel doesn't really offer that much throughout the whole trilogy. She gives him the little light, which he uses later down the line, but it does feel like if there's a section that could be cut down and tweaked, it would be that for me.
Yeah, I agree. I do think you hit two of the important things. Is the warning about Boromir taking the ring is quite. Yeah, I mean, I think we can all see it coming because he's definitely been dropping hints literally since the council meeting that he's going to do it. Yeah. But she makes it clear. Then there's the whole vision of the Shire in fire. Yeah. So this one I was reading up on. Apparently, this is a reference to, in the books, in the third one, after destroying the ring, they go back to the Shire and they found that while in their absence, the Shire has actually been turned into what they see in the vision. Right. But apparently it was very controversial. And so despite the ring being over, they go back and they have to, I think it's Saruman has done that as sort of revenge because he's aware of them while the rest of the books have been happening, and they fight them off and they manage to turn it back to the way it is. So that's obviously not shown at all in the movie. God knows the third one has enough endings without that. I know. But that's kind of just a reference to that. Then this is one of my favorite bits in the movie. I don't know if we've talked about it a lot, but one of my favorite things in TV shows and movies is processes. And seeing Saruman build his Uruk-hai army, I just absolutely love seeing, and I love them tearing down. Obviously, it's not nice for the planet and stuff, but visually seeing them tear down the trees and dig up the ore and breed the orcs and then arming them and preparing them and stuff.
It's very powerful. Yeah. The detail and the thought behind how they are created, the fact they come out with this weird like membrane out of the ground.
They're bred. I was reading up on this. He breeds them in the ground.
Yeah, stuff like that is just really interesting and clever and
entertaining.
It just brings the characters to life. It's not just they don't just appear out of something. There's like uniqueness to them, which makes it more three-dimensional.
Yeah, and another parallel I mentioned, the orcs versus the stormtroopers. Obviously, later on in the Star Wars movies, we do find out where the stormtroopers came from and clones and stuff. But it is nice here in the first one to better understand where they came from. Do you know how they shot? You know those shots that the ones I'm talking about when they're going down into the mines. Yeah. Those were all shot on models. They would have.
They reference in the credits people that were involved in models. And
stuff. They call. I don't know if this was one of them, but there's this thing they were called bigatures. Yeah, so they were big miniatures. Yeah, so they would have something that would be a lot more than a small model, but they would do that. They were explaining. I think it is specifically that shot. They had different layers, and they just had to green screen each one of them. So you'd have a camera go down into a miniature. And then they would have maybe another one that it would kind of go into all the way until you get to the point when you have Christopher Lee in the mine, which is then him with the background and the set, and how they just managed to sew all these things together. Yeah, really Some of the stuff, the way they filmed it is just crazy. Yeah. There was one shot, I think it's early, when Gandalf is going to see to Isengard, I think, where he's just on his horse. It's a pretty basic shot. He's on his horse, and I think he goes underneath a bridge or something. And the way they did that is they lined up the camera perfectly with a little wooden bridge that was really close to the camera. And then they just used the perspective of him running that it looked like he was actually running under the bridge, even though he's, a half mile away and stuff like that. I have a lot to say on perspective and the camera angles and stuff later on the production, but it's just mind-blowing how they made this movie.
It's incredible because it's also a hell of a long time ago as well. It's one of the things you don't really get a sense of it being an old film. Like it's
but
well
I think
over 20 years ago.
It is 20 years ago, but I think it is like you see them making the first Star Wars movies, and back then it does really seem old the way they did some of the stuff. Like some of the aliens were literally just puppets, but I feel like here it was just at the era where they were using full-fledged visual effects, like the troll. The troll is full-on, 3D animated and stuff like that. Apparently, they created a whole new type of software for the battle scenes where, I mean, it sounds like it was basically like Age of Empires, where they could be like, okay, we need, they'll have a certain number of people, but then like just add thousands of, and they could even make them fight within the computer model and stuff. So Saruman creates the Uruk-hai army, which is sent to track them down.
Yeah.
Then the Argonath shot is just one shot, with the two kings.
Yeah, and that's what, when I talk about Aim and Hen, the scene, I also include that bit as well, because they're obviously on the boats that then go past those two mega statues, and then more just on the edge of the forest, and then it kicks off from there, doesn't it? Iconic. It's just iconic, the two statues. It gets referenced in a lot of the imagery for the film is those two statues with
just
the hands
amazing
up. Yeah, it's not just the fact that they're big, it's just the pose of the hand as well. It's powerful.
And then after the peace and quiet of the river and that, we get Amun-Hen, Boromir trying to take the ring, which is, I feel like, when I rewatched it yesterday, that scene is just, it's really well acted. It's really well written.
It is.
And it's the way he starts off trying, because here's the thing, what he's saying at first does make sense. Logically, the idea of sharing the ring around to take the burden off him makes sense.
Yeah.
And then he just like, no, but I want it for myself. I want the power.
Yeah. It's very well acted, I think.
Yeah. Here's, again, I guess a plot question. What was the thinking? Because if, the fellowship does not last long. Obviously in the story, it's probably a few weeks, maybe a couple of months at most between Rivendell and Amun-Hen. What was the thinking about why they needed a fellowship? But then they decide, actually, no, it's better. Why did they just not send Frodo and Sam by themselves? Do you think they just didn't realize how hard it was going to be to have all those people around the ring?
Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah, and they've got to get past quite a lot of difficult stuff. These guys probably need some help, is what they were thinking.
Well, I mean, they still have a lot left for the next two movies, and they I guess they do get more help along the way.
What also comes across that I don't necessarily pick up on from all my previous watches as a younger man is the fact that they kind of make it out as if it's the ending they failed. In that they actually say the Fellowship has failed.
Yes, well, the Fellowship has failed because it didn't accomplish its goal.
The mission hasn't failed, but the hope has been knocked back hugely, and the Fellowship has been split up. So it's not a film that ends in a way that you typically expect, which is part of its beauty. Is it's like almost a anti-hero territory where you're seeing an ending that you're not expecting, and actually it's like, okay. This hasn't quite gone to plan.
Now that you're saying this, I'm being reminded of the first time of watching it, and then just being a bit confused because it's not a full-on bad ending like, say, an Empire Strikes Back where all hope seems lost.
Yeah, I
guess you could say Merry and Pippin getting kidnapped is pretty bad, but that's actually a funny one. Going back to your point about them being unimportant characters, when Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn say we will go fight, we will go find them and save them, you almost think, they're not that important. Is it really worth these three important characters like going off? Obviously, it leads to some great action sequences in the Two Towers.
Yeah, but
I feel like with Frodo and Sam, it's a very ambiguous ending, sort of like, okay, we know why you had to go by yourselves, and the fact that you can see Mordor is kind of encouraging, which I do find a bit annoying in the later movies because you're like, wait, you were close and now you're far again.
I know, I find it weird. That's one of there are a few little annoying bits for me, and that is one of them, because you can't help but think, like you say, they're there. It's just you can't really see that there's loads of stuff they've got to get through.
Well, and also they go back on their tracks a bunch of times. I think at the beginning of the Two Towers, they basically get lost, and that's when they need Gollum to help them. And then they get to the Black Gate, but then they realize, well, we can't go this way, so they have to go a completely different way.
Yeah,
I bet if you saw it on a map, their exact route, it would get very frustrating because it would go whoop.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of the characters, but let's just do some of them. We'll go quickly, like Merry and Pippin. I think we've said what we need to about them.
I think so. Yeah.
We understand why they're there. Oh yeah, I was thinking for each one of the characters, we'll go through some of them quicker and some less. If we wanted to give them a grade of meh, fine, good, or great. So I had Merry and Pippin as fine. They fulfill their role, but I wouldn't say, would you say meh?
No, they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're annoying.
Yeah, so fine. Sam?
Fine again, I'd say.
I agree. I think his character very much, like, he's probably actually even more than Merry. He's probably the most forgettable character. He's so important in the next movies that he's just kind of there until he's ready to spring into action. One fun thing was that apparently the actor Sean Astin, so he was a lot older than Elijah Wood was only 20 when he started filming, whereas Sam was in his 30s, I think late 30s, and he had like a wife and kids back home and stuff. And apparently Elijah Wood was very absent-minded and stuff, like he would forget his keys and stuff like that. So Sean Astin took on the role in real life of kind of taking care of him. And he says he's like, I understood what I was doing, and it would help me embrace the role of Sam of taking care of Mr. Frodo and stuff. Boromir. So obviously he's the one that is the only one that doesn't appear in any of the others.
Yeah. He is quite integral to this film. So what are we saying? Good?
I'm putting him as good. I'm not putting him quite as great.
No, not quite. But Sean Bean plays that character perfectly. And
a very flawed, like not the acting, but the character himself is very flawed and obviously
massively,
weak.
Yeah, massively.
But you do feel, and I was actually thinking about this earlier about how obviously there's so much nuance on the goodness, but the bad, you were saying good versus evil, and obviously the difficulties of being good and stuff. But on the evil front, it is mostly black and white. There is no ambiguity that Saruman and Sauron and the orcs and the Nazgul, they're all just 100% bad. But Boromir is actually an interesting one where he's not a bad person, but he's just weak. And so I think he offers that bit of an interesting nuance about the power of the ring and what it does even to a person because his intentions are good. He doesn't want to take it to be rich or to take over the world. He literally wants to do it to save his family and his country.
That's a good point. And he does give you a little bit of information for further down the line, talking about being the steward of Gondor and all this stuff and Minas Tirith. There is like a little bit of a
all of those things when you're rewatching it, having watched those, you do. Because I feel like when you watch let's say the second one for the first time, you're like, wait, so there's this whole new world, Gondor, and all these characters, and we've never even heard of them. And then you rewatch it, oh no, they did. They very much bring them up in a subtle way, so you don't notice it the first time, but when you rewatch, and I think that's good because if you did rewatch, and it literally seemed like they made the first one, and then they just added all this other stuff, but it is just shows very much. Again, I know I keep bringing it up, but there are just a lot of parallels. It's very much like that in the Harry Potter books as opposed to movies where they'll mention a character in the first one that doesn't actually become relevant until the fifth one, but they're important. Good segue. Apparently, Orlando Bloom originally auditioned for Faramir, so in the second and third, because they must have been casting them all around the same time.
Once,
So he's actually the one. So Legolas, Orlando Bloom, was 20. He was so him and Elijah Wood were they're both the youngest amongst the fellowship. He wanted to be Faramir, but he was cast as Legolas.
Upgrade.
He was he was 2 days out of drama school when he found out that he had the role.
Crazy.
He'd had one acting role before. He was a rent boy in a 1997 British drama. Technically, he's credited with Black Hawk Down before this because it came out earlier that year. But he'd obviously filmed this. First.
Okay, he doesn't. To be fair, well, actually, not to be fair. To be slightly harsh, he doesn't do a huge amount of acting in this film.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying I like you. Legolas is my favorite character. I had a giant Legolas poster in my room. My brother and we used to play the video games of the second and third, and we always fought over who got to be Legolas. Yeah. He was the coolest. Yeah. But I will say I'm giving him a meh. I think,
fair. I can get on board with that.
I think the character's great, but you can really because the thing is he does actually have a couple of serious lines. And he's kind of overdoing it, and he hasn't got the acting chops for it. So I do find he's the sort of person you're like, it's fine. It's not. Yeah. I don't hate it, but I think especially because knowing that I liked him so much as a kid because he was cool. Yeah. Now being like, no, he's definitely the weaker link in terms of acting chops.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
But it worked out fine for him. he obviously got cast in Pirates of the Caribbean on the back, probably of the Fellowship.
Yeah.
Pirates of the Caribbean came out in 2003 between Two Towers and Return of the King. Arguably, then, at 2003, he's got to be one of the top 3 biggest movie stars in the world at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
And he definitely is better. I'd say he's definitely better in Pirates of the Caribbean as he is in The Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, for sure.
And I will... It's a hard role because he has to be... The things he say are kind of ridiculous, like because he's got to be this sort of elfish, saintly creature and stuff. I think he's better in the Two Towers because most of his lines are just a banter with Gimli, and that's really funny.
Yeah, yeah, and you get more from him in the second one.
Yes.
He's a bit more involved. He's like there for Aragorn when he has a bit of wobble. Whereas in the first one,
he's very serious.
He's a little other than the character traits of being able to walk on snow and stuff. He is a little bit one-dimensional.
Yeah, and he's there. I think he is there to give the more serious thing. Like, he has to say things like, "You do not know who this is. This is Aragorn, son of blah blah blah."
Yeah, yeah.
Or I can't. I just have this image of him doing a serious face, looking off in the distance, and he has to say stuff like that, which is just hard for anyone. I think he's. Because you got to think about who the other elves, because the elves have a very particular vibe, and the other people playing elves are, Hugo Weaving and Cate Blanchett, who are some of the greatest actors of their generation.
Yeah.
And even them, sometimes it can seem a bit silly because they're such serious characters, but obviously they're just the next caliber, so they pull it off. So, yeah, Legolas, we agree. As rewatching it, not the best, but still cool. Love the bows and arrows.
100%.
And absolutely, he's an integral part of the story, the movies. His enemy, who became his BFF, Gimli, I think he's good.
Yeah, he's fine. He brings a bit of comedy as well. You don't get too much from him either in this first one.
I think both him and Legolas, they are. I think again, he's one-dimensional. Maybe I think there's more. If anything, their second dimension is their rivalry, but that really blossoms in the second one, and they are a lot more, and they do become the comic relief. The two of them.
It's interesting about the fact that they film this all together. You start to see things. I don't know how they filmed it sequentially. If it was, I know things would have been done in different orders, but you can sort of get a sense of.
The camaraderie builds.
It builds a little bit, and at the end of the Fellowship, just as they set off to chase down the Uruk-hai, you get a sense from where Gimli says something like "yes." That's like the bit where his character starts to come through, and it's only really that at that point it starts.
Yeah, because the big thing with him and Legolas in the next one is like counting the number of orcs they've killed. So that whole let's go kill some orcs.
Yeah.
And their whole, the three of them at the beginning of Two Towers, their whole chasing thing is like quite a cool bit.
Is. Yeah.
The dwarves are natural sprinters and stuff like that. But a couple of things you mentioned about this. So I think they filmed most of the Fellowship, just not necessarily in the same order, and then they moved on to the others. But apparently, when they were filming the scenes after Moria, when Gandalf had died, Ian McKellen hadn't joined the crew yet, so they're actually really sad about him being dead, even though they hadn't met him.
Well, you definitely don't get that sense at all. It's really sad.
Yeah, it is. And another funny thing is Gimli, who's obviously, I don't think he's shorter than the Hobbits, but the actor John Rhys Davies, he's actually the tallest of all the actors. He's 6'1".
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he's good. Aragorn. How do you rate him? Great?
Yeah.
You put him full. Did you always think that, or do you think as an adult you appreciate him more?
He's always been great and only gotten greater.
I feel like, again, considering that Legolas was my favorite, Aragorn was just more this dark, mysterious, sort of more moody guy.
Yeah.
And I didn't dislike him, but I wasn't the biggest fan when I was younger. I think he's good now, and I think he's one of those that there's just a lot that's unsaid. He's doing a lot with his face, and sometimes it can come across as him being subdued and not doing much. But and also I was reading up, I didn't realize this until now, about his whole, obviously I knew he was the heir to the throne, but the fact that, for example, he was, that he'd been raised by the elves, that he'd been in hiding for his whole life, about the fact that I don't know if it's in the extra scenes, about how his mother sent him to live with the elves to hide his identity and stuff. Oh yeah, what is a ranger?
It's something that's not really explained, is it at all?
Because what is he doing before the beginning of this movie? So he's raised by the elves, but then he is a grown man. So what's he been doing for the last 15 years?
I don't know. I don't know. It's just a name that sounds cool, I suppose. Maybe it's nothing, and that's just a bit of a mask to hide his identity. He's just maybe no one knows what a ranger is. They all just think it must be something.
I'm sure in the books there's probably a whole chapter about the Order of the Rangers or something like that. Do you know about the casting drama around Viggo Mortensen?
No.
So I think I mentioned it before about the fighting. So he was the only one. Everyone else, they scoured the world. They cast all these people very well, and for him they cast someone else. And they started shooting, and within, it's not clear if it was days or weeks, but very quickly they realized, and Peter Jackson says he realized that the person they cast was too young. His name was Stuart Townsend. He was 22 years old when they cast him, so 14 years younger than Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah.
And so they fired this guy, and they literally called up Viggo Mortensen and said they had never met him. They said, have you read the Lord of the... I think he must have known this movie was happening because I'm sure everyone knew about it. And have you read the Lord of the Rings? And Viggo Mortensen said no. And basically they said, well, we really like to fly you out to New Zealand to start shooting in a couple of days because we need you and stuff. And the story goes, this has been... Peter Jackson's told it, Viggo Mortensen's told it, that he was... It's not clear if he was going to or not, but he was at the very least unsure. And it's his 11-year-old son who either had read the book or was very much aware of the story that said, Dad, if you have any opportunity to be in this movie, you absolutely have to take it. And the big thing you have to remember about people like him who was married with kids, the same with Sean Astin, is I'm sure they got to, I think they took maybe short breaks, probably a week or two between the movies just to recuperate. But roughly speaking, they were working away from home for 15 to 20 months. So there was a huge commitment to be away from your family, like going through swamps and stuff. So his son pushed him to do it, and the rest is history. Yeah.
What happened to the other guy?
He's been in a couple of things. But nothing huge, nothing you would have heard of. So clearly they made the right choice. Because if it was one of those where he had become someone huge, you thought, oh, that might have been a missed thing. Yeah. On his again, Stuart Townsend's his name. On his Wikipedia, there's a quote by him where he sounds very bitter about it. He claims he was never paid.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, he claims he was never paid for it. And he says that he hated the experience of being on there and that it was kind of a relief to be let go anyway. But
you would say that.
Yeah, you would. I'm going to keep best for last. But so just a couple of other people that we sort of touched upon quickly. But so Arwen, Galadriel, and Elrond, they're good. They're fine. They do what they're supposed to do. They don't blow your mind. You're not exactly excited to see them on screen or anything.
Not really. There's a little bit of mysteriousness around Elrond and Galadriel. But yeah, and you're introduced to Arwen being Aragorn's love interest.
Yeah, I find that all a bit shoehorned in. Like I really
a little bit. It comes out of nowhere. You're not exactly introduced into much of how they've met. You just they're together. Okay.
Also, when you read, then they're not really together. The idea is that they had a romance, but then he obviously went off to be a ranger, whatever that was.
It's all a bit confusing. Whether or not you need it, I don't really know. Because obviously that continues into the trilogy a little, not hugely, but a little bit. Yeah, I don't know if you necessarily need it at that point.
But I think we were still in the early 2000s. We were still in that part where you can imagine the producer said there needs to be some sort of love story. Yeah. So then I think in my mind, the two greats are Gandalf and Saruman. Are the two strongest links in the movie. Yeah. So Saruman, have you ever seen Christopher Lee as Dracula? Because that's obviously what he was famous for.
No, I haven't.
Me neither, but he was, he's considered a great. Yeah. Apparently so Christopher Lee read, this is obviously, ever since he was a kid, he read Lord of the Rings every single year of his life until his death. Oh, really? Because he died in 2015. Yeah. And he's the only person involved in it who had actually met Tolkien in person because he was that old. So it kind of seems like and apparently he told Peter Jackson that being involved in this movie was the culmination of his career and the proudest moment, which when you're, a man in his 70s or 80s at the end of a great career to Peter Jackson, who's still an up and coming director, it must be like, oh shit, this is a lot of pressure. But it doesn't seem like there was much debate over him being cast because then he is perfectly cast. And Gandalf, however, less so. Apparently Sean Connery was considered. Okay. Which I can't see it, but maybe.
Yeah.
And
maybe.
then Anthony Hopkins, our old Zorro buddy, he was considered, but he turned it down. These are like, half-assed rumors. So apparently Peter Jackson now has tried to say, no, it was always Ian McKellen, but then you never know how these things come about.
Yeah.
Ian McKellen was the only actor to get an Oscar nomination for any of the Lord of the Rings. He got Best Supporting Actor nomination for this one, Fellowship, and that's the only acting nomination across all three, which does make sense. It's definitely overall the weaker element of all of the things. It's not a problem.
No.
I don't think you would want to have... I think if you had someone in the Aragorn position who was vying for a Best Actor nomination or win, it kind of becomes a different movie because...
It does, yeah.
Especially this one, The Fellowship.
Yeah.
This one it's pretty much one story, and it's a story about a group of people. And then the other ones are very much like with Game of Thrones, when there's 3 or 4 different stories happening at the same time. So it is very much about the group and not about the individual. So I don't see a problem with it. So how do you think Elijah Wood does as Frodo in this movie and beyond in the trilogy? I guess on the meh, fair, good, great.
He's I say good. I think he acts the role pretty well. He communicates the anxieties and stress and all that stuff. He is a bit annoying. There are moments in the Two Towers and Return of the King where the scenes drag a little bit with him and Sam, where it gets a little bit grating how much he's burdened by this thing.
Yeah, he's whiny.
He's a bit whiny and whingy.
But I feel like that's more the character than the actor.
Yeah. So I'd go good on.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I was younger, I really didn't particularly like him. But as you get older and you understand the complexity of the role and the character, and I think there's a very... In movies like this with so many actors, you need a very particular type of person and in the middle who kind of holds it all together but without overshadowing, and he kind of allows... Again, you wouldn't want to have someone in a star-making performance, who's being nominated for Oscars, because you need to be able to focus on everyone and everything around. Kind of I think I call it a linchpin actor, and it happens a lot in movies, and I think he's very good at that. So yeah, he doesn't jump off the screen or anything, but he very much holds the movie together.
Yeah. The point where he realizes that he has to go off on his own I found that weirdly emotional, and watching it the other day, which typically I wouldn't ever feel like that, but watching it with a slightly different lens on, it did feel like quite a big point, and he does it very well.
Yeah, I think when you've got a more mature point of view, it's just different, because as a kid you think, oh, you want to be the hero and stuff, whereas as an adult you really understand the sacrifice that he's pretty much giving up his life to do this for the greater good. Which is one of the biggest themes, is courage, and doing and taking on an endeavor with the odds of success are really, really low. And stuff. So now we've done the cast, we're going to do our recasting. So a modern recasting. The idea here is that we're each going to pick one actor who would be recast in the today 2025 version of Lord of the Rings. They should be about the same sort of age, but it doesn't have to be. And they would either play the character in a similar way or in a unique / even better way. We're not, because there's so many characters here, we're going to do the Fellowship. And we're not going to do Merry and Pippin. We're not going to do the whole options thing. We're just going to go, you and I pick one actor for each.
Okay, yeah, really difficult doing this.
So let's start with Frodo.
Okay. I've got 2 options here that I can't choose between.
I feel like we might have one, if not both, the same. Go ahead.
I don't know. I really like the idea of Dev Patel being Frodo.
Really? Okay, no, that's not at all.
My alternative option is the guy who's in Sex Education.
Oh,
which I don't know it. Yeah, this guy. Yeah, I've never seen it. I don't know much about it, but he just looks Frodo-esque.
I can see that. So which of those 2 are you picking?
I'll go for the Sex Education guy, because Dev Patel, I'm going to put him down as Sam for now.
Okay. I mean, so obviously this isn't an important thing, but for me, one of the things is when I was looking at the pictures of actors, I had to imagine them as Hobbit, and Dev Patel is quite tall, so
yeah, that's
making
true.
him into a Hobbit.
But they do so much trickery.
Yeah, they do.
So
but
they're going to have to do a lot of that.
So you're doing Asa Butterfield as Frodo and
Yes.
Dev Patel as Sam.
Yeah, I'm not happy about Dev Patel as Sam, but
You got it.
that's the best I've got.
So I had two choices for Frodo. Is Tom Holland
Okay.
or Timothy Chalamet.
Okay, so I don't think I've got Chalamet somewhere else.
Okay. I think I can guess where.
Yeah.
But then I had other people for Sam, but none of them worked quite well. And I think both Tom Holland... So, basically, I'm doing Timothy Chalamet as Frodo and Tom Holland as Sam.
Okay.
Gimli.
Gimli, I've gone for David Harbour.
Yeah, that's a great choice. So I thought a funny one could be Jason Momoa to make him into a dwarf, but I'm gonna go more for the humor side. I'm gonna go with Josh Gad.
Who's that?
He's the guy who does the voice of the snowman in Frozen, but he's like a short. He became really famous from being in the Book of Mormon. He's like short and fat.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Boromir.
Boromir, I have gone for Tom Hardy.
Oh, I like that. I had potentially Jake Gyllenhaal because he's like
I
like his evil
that.
side.
Yeah.
And then I went for Oscar Isaac.
Okay, I think I prefer Gyllenhaal on that one.
Oh, now you're making me doubt myself. Okay,
he's
okay. I'm reversing. I'm taking Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so Tom Hardy for you, Jake Gyllenhaal for me.
Yeah.
Then Legolas.
Okay, here's where Chalamet makes an appearance for me.
Assume.
He's got that
he's very elfy,
feminine vibe.
I think he's just
wispy.
He does all of that. Because Orlando Bloom is actually quite tall, and I just feel Timothy Chalamet is too small.
He's too wispy. It's very. The only other option I had here, and I don't really like it either, is Eddie Redmayne.
No, he's too small as well.
Yeah.
So
it's really difficult, this one.
So I think I have a good one, but I'm not gonna pick it. Jacob Elordi, so the guy from Euphoria, who's the main guy. Have you seen Saltburn?
No.
Oh, you should watch it. You enjoy it. But he's tall, he's thin, he's 27, he's very good looking.
Okay.
But I'm gonna go with someone different. So, did you notice there are no black characters in Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
And so I googled it, and apparently it is just because etymologically all the characters were meant to be white. So I'm gonna break that rule.
Okay.
And go with these. I don't know if you know him. You've seen Get Out?
Yeah.
So you know the guy who gets kidnapped right at the beginning and then whose brain has been transposed. His name is Lakeith Stanfield.
Oh yeah.
So I'm putting him as Legolas. He's tall, he's skinny, he's very good looking, he's a very good actor, and he's got that elfish quality to him.
Yeah, I know the guy.
Like.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's my pick, but I think Jacob Elordi would be good as well. So that leaves us with Aragorn and Gandalf. Okay. So I have a lot of Aragorns, and a couple of Gandalfs. Who have you gone for?
The trouble is there is obviously an association with something else, but Kit Harington.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. That's. Is that who you're picking?
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
So I considered your friend Adam Driver, who you picked for Zorro,
which I stand by the way.
That's fine. You're wrong, but you can stand by it. Other people I consider, but I'm not going to, were Charlie Cox, the guy who plays Daredevil in the Marvel series.
Okay, yeah.
Chris Evans, I thought as
Chris
well.
Evans,
not dark enough, but Sebastian Stan is my choice.
I don't know who that is.
So he's the Winter Soldier in the Marvel movies.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. He's got that dark demeanor, but also, and he just played Donald Trump in The Apprentice movie, which he's very good in.
Yeah, okay.
So that's who I'm going with.
Okay,
and then
like
Gandalf,
Kenneth Branagh.
Oh, that's good.
I feel like he's like the new Ian McKellen.
That's a very good choice. So I had one. At first, I could only find one, but then I was going through lists. I came across two others, and I'm actually still. So my first one was Mark Strong.
Mm-hmm.
So he's about the same age. Obviously, it'd be weird seeing him with hair, but I feel like he's got that sort of British, like he can be funny but serious and suave and stuff. But then two other people came across were Gary Oldman and Hugh Laurie.
Okay.
And I think I'm gonna go Hugh Laurie.
Okay, that's an interesting one. I wouldn't have gone with that, but yeah, okay. I can see that.
Guys, you're gonna be voting at home on which of us has done a better recasting. And also, there's a chance here to win a prize. We're actually going to be doing a giveaway of the 4K box set of the trilogy of Lord of the Rings.
Now we're talking.
In order to win that, you need to subscribe to the channel, the YouTube channel, and you need to drop a comment saying which one of the two recastings you prefer, or if you disagree, tell us who you would recast. So here's the recap. Frosty's recasting is Asa Butterfield as Frodo, Dev Patel as Sam, David Harbour as Gimli, Timothy Chalamet as Legolas, Tom Hardy as Boromir, Kit Harington as Aragorn, and Kenneth Branagh as Gandalf.
Yeah, I love it.
So if you want that, drop in a comment that you prefer Frosty's recasting, or if you prefer mine, that is Hugh Laurie as Gandalf, Sebastian Stan as Aragorn, Jake Gyllenhaal as Boromir, Lakeith Stanfield as Legolas, Josh Gad as Gimli, Tom Holland as Sam, Timothy Chalamet as Frodo. So those are your two choices. Some others that I did, a very random one is Gollum. I would have done Kieran Culkin.
I had a couple in for Merry and Pippin. Will Poulter, I feel like should get in there somewhere.
I came across he occurred to me, but again I struggled to see him as a Hobbit. But I know again that shouldn't be a limited thing. So we're going to do the dialogue and the script, and I want to break this down to two things. I want to take you through basically the journey from the book to the screen via the script, and then we'll do our favorite lines. I think I'll start with the explanation bit, and then we'll just have fun with the lines.
Go with it.
So obviously, everything is based on the books by Tolkien, which we said would publish as 3 books. The story, so I watched this 5 or 6 hours behind the scenes of just The Fellowship of the Ring, and for anyone who's a big fan of this movie, I would highly recommend. You can actually find them on YouTube if you do behind the scenes Fellowship of the Ring. Someone has put it in 4 parts, or if you have the discs, you can watch it there as well. Yeah. But there's just so much, from interviewing Peter Jackson to interviewing the costume designers to,
I think I've seen all
and so they tell the story about how so Peter Jackson, his 2 writing partners, Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, wrote a treatment, so a 90-page treatment. For those who don't know, a treatment is basically a sample of what a script would be like. So it'll be a synopsis, it'll be a breakdown of the scene, maybe it'll be some pages of script. It's really to give an idea to a production studio of what a movie was going to be would look like. You can do that for one movie, you can do it for a series. And from then, they had some sort of deal with Miramax, where they thought they were going to be able to make 2 movies. So the whole trilogy in 2 movies. And it seems like they had written those 2 scripts. And close to pre-production, Miramax basically said, no, if you're going to do this, you need to make it into 1 movie. So just imagine the 9 hours theatrical version just going into one movie.
Impossible.
And basically Peter Jackson said, yeah, we can't do that, thankfully. And Miramax, it seems, were okay with that. They didn't say you're tied in with us, and they gave them a chance to basically shop the movie around to another studio. And so they went around Hollywood pitching it, and they went to New Line Cinema, and they pitched the 2-movie version to their the head of the studio, who apparently was a very hard man to read. They finished the pitch, and apparently the only problem the head of New Line Cinema said was, we can't make this in 2 movies. It's gonna have to be 3 movies. It makes no sense. And obviously, thank God, because this could have been a disaster, I think, if they tried to make it anything other. So that's how we ended up with the 3 movies, and how they committed up front to, I don't know how much the budget was originally, but as we said, it turned up to be around $300 million. They invested, they agreed to make all 3. They were able to finance filming them basically one after the other, which again is very rare in Hollywood. And most recently it was done with Kevin Costner's Horizon movies, where they made 2 with plans to go into pre-production for the 3rd. The first one was a complete disaster. They haven't even released the second one at the time of making this, and he put hundreds of millions or tens of millions of his own money into it. So it's extremely risky, especially with something so expensive. But given all the costumes and the sets and everything, I'm sure they saved so much money by doing it in this way.
Yeah.
So they had the scripts, which were adapted from the book, but obviously a lot of things were different, and they had to summarize stuff, they had to get rid of characters, they had to develop other things, and just make it work as a script. As I said, the scripts were being constantly rewritten, which was a challenge for the actors. Apparently sometimes they wouldn't even bother learning their lines the night before because they knew they were going to change the next day. And then another big thing between the script and the final screen is, obviously any movies use storyboards, so where they sketch what shots are going to look like and stuff. But Peter Jackson went to the next level. He basically storyboarded the entire trilogy before, going into production. Then they animated the storyboards pretty much into a cartoon. They got voice actors or even just actors to record all of the voices. So they pretty much had an extremely rough cartoon version of the entire movie before even making it, and they were able to show that to the actors.
That's the way to do it, isn't it?
Well, I mean, obviously a lot of time and money went into it, but it's so much cheaper to do all of this than to then mess up afterwards. Then they did pre-visualized special effects, where they would do, and this wasn't even just for big special effects. They show shots of Gandalf galloping. You know, you could do that in cartoon, but they just wanted to enhance even more the cartoon version. And so they did this for a bunch of shots where that way they would go and say, today we need to get these 3 shots of Gandalf galloping. This is exactly what it needs to look like. They had models of like Mordor and Isengard where they would plan the shots months, even years before they were going to shoot it. And then the big thing was pre-visualization VFX, where they would plan something like the troll in Moria and know exactly what it needs to look like before shooting it. And that way, when they would shoot it with the actors, they know exactly the shots they need to get. The actors said it was really weird sometimes because they would just say, okay, I need you this shot where you just jump into a wall, or where you fall down, or where you hold on to this invisible thing. And it's because obviously the director, Peter Jackson, knew exactly where the VFX and stuff was going to go in. And apparently a lot of the technology for this pre-viz is the technical term, came from the Star Wars Lucasfilm. They were very good. They invited them to the ranch and they shared a bunch of their technology. So just so much work went into it. Yeah. But when you hear how they did it, you think, obviously this is how you would do it. You wouldn't just go and be like, oh, let's start shooting this thing. Yeah. So that's kind of how the script was adapted. But then in terms of the actual lines, what are some of your favorite lines?
Well, this Fellowship has lots of iconic lines in it. You can reel them off, really. Like, you've obviously got the "You shall not pass!" You've also got the
"If you want him, come and claim him."
I really like, because it's pretty much Ian McKellen's first line. And I know it's a cliche, but guess what? It's great. You're late.
A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
The trouble I've got is that I know the film so well that almost the entire dialogue is in my mind, and so therefore it comes across as iconic. But you've got like "My Precious." You hear that for the first time. You've got
"Are you frightened?" "Yes, not nearly frightened enough."
And then a couple of the comedic lines I like are Mary in the pub saying,
"What's that?"
"This, my friend, is a pint.
It comes in pints?"
"Oh,
I can get you one."
You've also got at the end of the whole Council of Elrond meeting, which is quite a serious thing. You have the lovely bit at the end that Mary says,
"You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring."
Right. Where are we going?
Yeah.
Which just helps like add a little bit of funniness to it.
I think this is in the extended version, but after that, when they're setting off and they literally leave Rivendell, and Frodo's at the front, and they just come out, and he goes to Gandalf,
"Hold on, Gandalf. Is it left or right?"
"Left."
He doesn't have no idea where he's going. One I like on a more serious one, because it kind of summarizes everything, is Boromir saying,
"It is a strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt over so small a thing."
Yeah, that is a very, very good line, and captures the essence of the film.
Yeah.
You've also got Gandalf's line where he is just about to fall down.
"Fly, you fools!"
Because this is the whole Eagles thing.
I know that's something that we could maybe get into later. But I've always thought of it as being "Fly, you fools." That's quite iconic, I think. "Find the Halflings" is a really iconic one, which I would reference. Find the Halflings! This film and the whole trilogy is great for single word character exclamations, like "Aragorn." It's so good at that. It's one of my favorite. It's the thing that I probably reference the most. It's just randomly shouting out "Legolas." Those are my main ones, and then the last one I'm
Mr.
going
Frodo.
to just yeah, exactly. Is the line from Gandalf, which Frodo remembers or like has a vision of at the end, which is
I wish the ring had never come to me. wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
Yeah.
Which is just one of those lines that you hits you.
I don't know if I think of it with that line or if there's another one he says, but it's the whole, I wish this didn't happen to me. And then basically saying that's how anyone who's given a responsibility, if they're the right person, that's how they should react. Yeah. Because that is the thing about Frodo, is he doesn't want this, whereas everyone else wants the ring and he doesn't want it, which is why he's the right person. I think that's it. I think it's actually going back to Timothée Chalamet. I think it's in Dune when he says that he doesn't want to rule. And his dad says that's why you have to rule, which is a theme that comes in a lot of these stories. Yeah. So we've talked about the music, and I think about how iconic it is, and just how amazing, and how it is the thing. If I say Lord of the Rings, chances are the first thing you'll think about is dun 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 dun.
Yeah, 100%.
It's impossible to talk about the production of this without talking about Weta Production, which is the company that, I mean, it's a bit sneaky, but when he was making one of his previous movies, Peter Jackson bought this company for the visual effects there. And then when he got the budget to make this, he basically hired the company that he owned to do it. They do special effects. I think they started off as more of a practical props, costumes and stuff, but they pretty much made everything. They had people making swords. They had seamstresses. They had people molding masks. They had people building weapons. Apparently, they built 48,000 pieces of armor. They had 40 seamstresses who worked year-round to make 19,000 costumes.
Yeah.
They needed something crazy, like 10 versions of the costume for each actor, and then each of the main ones. But then you had the actor needed their costume, then their stunt double needed it, then their body double needed it. So you needed about 40 costumes, versions of each costume for all the main characters. Then, every elf, every orc, everything. They made 1,800 pairs of feet for the Hobbit, and they had to spend an hour to an hour and a half every morning getting the feet painted onto them. Apparently it was such a pain in the ass, but then sometimes they wouldn't actually shoot their feet. And Sean Astin kept count, and he said out of maybe 250 days of shooting, he counted 50 days where they had their stupid feet put on, and then they didn't actually use it. And he would keep a count and tell Peter Jackson, 40 days! It's been 40 days, you haven't shot our feet today. And again, in the bonus feature, they have a thing, it's a day in the life of the Hobbit, where they show them getting up at 5:30, getting their feet put on, getting their wigs put on, getting their ears put on.
Grueling.
Speaking of the feet, Sean Astin in The Fellowship, the scene where he runs to the boat when he tries to catch up with Frodo?
Yeah.
Have you heard this story?
No.
That they'd send divers in to try and clear the water, but they'd missed it, and he got a shard of glass right through his foot and had to be airlifted off the set for emergency stitches and stuff. That seems like, given how many stunts there are in this, apparently Legolas broke a rib at one point, but it seems like that shard of glass was one of the bigger incidents. One of the really interesting things I found listening to all the behind the scenes is that one of the number one instructions that Peter Jackson had for all of the props, the sets, the costumes, was that this shouldn't feel like fantasy. This should feel like they're recreating a time in human history that actually happened. That when the armor and the sculptures, it should look like they needed an archaeological dig to discover that. And it's something that I never really thought about, but if you put aside the magic and the dragons and stuff, it does really look like it was real.
Yeah, which is it's very similar vibes to Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it
really.
is. You could feel like Game of Thrones. They probably hired a bunch of the same people.
They've lent into that a lot more.
Yeah. Then, the Hobbits, so that they added the feet. The big thing with the Hobbits, I did really dig deep on this, is how they made them look small.
Yeah.
Do you know, or do you want me to, do you know any of, I listed 5 different ways. They must
have used doubles for a lot of stuff.
So that was one of them.
Yeah.
So they used body doubles, and they had different ones. They had this crew of very short guys of Indian descent who, I think, and I was saying to Sunita, and she was like, why were they Indian? And I think there was just something about the fact that if you have, white small people, they don't look like hobbits, because they the thing is, the hobbits literally look like miniature version of humans, so they need to have the build of a human just in small.
Yeah.
And this particular this particular group of guys, whatever their ethnic background and where they were from in the world, they had the perfect build. And so obviously their skin, they weren't white. So sometimes they would wear these really creepy masks, like white masks. Yeah. Obviously they would never be close to them, but shots like when they're in, they're walking through the mountain. There's a behind the scenes there. None of those are the real actors. Those are all, even Gandalf and Aragorn are just stand-ins that sort of look like them. Yeah. But so they had these body double. They also had children sometimes to play the hobbits. So when you would see, a lot of the times you see them running for the back, it's actually kids that are dressed, and they had a kid was assigned to each one of them, and they had to study their mannerisms, so they really like came across like them. So body doubles was one. Another one was blue screen and green screen. So they would literally just have Frodo do his scene in front of a green screen, and then they would superimpose it over Gandalf doing it, so that they just made him look as small as he needed to be. Yeah. That's when their faces were necessary and stuff. I think sometimes you can really tell, like when you can clearly see their faces and their bodies are tiny, so they're and it almost looks a bit weird and forced. Yeah. But you got to do what you got to do. Yeah. I think maybe sometimes it's just that you don't realize how small the hobbits are actually supposed to be. Yeah. Because one of the things they do a lot is they just would act on their knees. So just in a scene, they would film them from the top, and I think that's it. There, they seem bigger there, even though they're short, than sometimes when they're literally just making them the size of children. Yeah, yeah. Another one was forced perspective. They would build the sets so that basically you would have... The one shot they gave as an example was when Gandalf, right after he's caught Merry and Pippin with the fireworks, and he's telling them off and they're doing the dishes, and they're supposed to be right next to him, but actually they're 5 or 6 feet behind him to make them seem small and him seem big. But the whole scene is just set up so that from face on, it looks like they're at the same level, but they're behind. Clever. And there was a lot of that. So lots of tricks. And you can sometimes see which ones they've used at different points and stuff. I mentioned, obviously, we've talked about the special effects and how ahead of time they are. And I think they've aged pretty well.
Really well. The copy I've got that I watched is of quite an old DVD, so the resolution's not perfect. So I imagine if I were to watch it at the best resolution you can, it might notice a few more things, but it's not really going to bother me in any case.
And then, as I said before, just a lot of bigatures and miniatures and a lot. That's the thing. That one I hadn't even thought about. Is a lot of the shots of Rivendell and stuff. They didn't actually build all of that. They built small versions. Although they did build a lot of the stuff as well.
Yeah, amazing.
And that was years in the making. I forgot to say earlier. So the movie came out 2001. They started filming it in 1999. But Peter Jackson, the whole script and stuff, he started working on it. Well, the earliest points at 1997. So it was very much a very long project for him. Yeah. But he was very well rewarded for it. Do you know what his salary was? God, no. So he took $10 million per movie, and then he got 10% of the profits.
So he's doing all right.
And he recently, last few years, that company I mentioned, Weta, he sold... I don't know all of it, but he sold a big chunk of it because they are one of the premier special effects company in the world now. Most Marvel movies, they're involved in the Avatar movies. I was going through their cinematography, and they just, they must be the biggest VFX studio in the world, or definitely up there. But he's now a billionaire from all of the money he's made from that. Obviously, he made all the Hobbit movies as well, and selling that, so he's done very well. On that note, actually, guess who the highest paid actor was? Highest and lowest, if you can guess.
At what point are we?
So for the trilogy, how much they were paid for the trilogy?
For the whole trilogy, Ian McKellen.
So Ian McKellen was the highest paid. He made $13 million, which makes sense when you consider actor's caliber. Orlando Bloom was the lowest paid. He made $175,000 for the whole trilogy.
Wow.
Yeah, which is still nothing to sniff at from a normal person. But when you consider that he spent 15 months on set, working, no weekends, no days off and stuff.
It obviously led to lots of other things.
Yeah, I'd actually seen that in a Howard Stern interview recently where he asked him about it, and Howard Stern is just sort of like, I can't believe that's what you got paid. And Orlando was like, I would do it again for free, given what it did for my career and stuff.
Yeah. Wow, okay. Interesting.
And then everyone else varied. Frodo, apparently, once he made all 3, he made $1 million, but still only $1 million. Yeah. The actor played Gimli, Boromir, they made a couple of million. Then the younger one, basically the younger you were, the less you made. Yeah. So we opened up with the reason that you love this so much is because there is so much to love in an essence. So now we've kind of gone through all of those things. How would you sort of tie it all back together about why this movie is so amazing?
I think it's quite... Having gone through everything in a bit more detail, it reminds me that there's a bit more depth to it. And there's some meaningfulness in the message behind the whole thing, and the good versus evil, and that even though times are hard and maybe you don't want to do certain things, it might still be the right thing to do, and you just have to kind of do it. As a complete package, it's overwhelmingly good in that you're hit with everything sense-wise. It's very evocative, powerful. The imagery, the characters, the sound, the look of the setting, the story. There's just so much that when you tie it all together, it's just this really powerful, unique thing that's so evocative and brings up so many images in the mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really enjoy kind of the layers to it, about how this can just be a movie that you watch, or it can be a movie that you read the book, or you watch the trilogy and you watch the extended version and you watch The Hobbit. Like, it could be just a movie experience. It can become a literary experience. It can become a historical experience if you want to study Tolkien himself and his life. We didn't talk much about him, but his life was fascinating. A lot of his big theme here is obviously death, and he was in the trenches in World War I. And we think, a lot of people think that's where some of these ideas started, and obviously about the horrors of war. You can tie into themes of humanity and stuff like that. You can immerse yourself into the world of Middle Earth by learning. Some people learn Elfish and stuff like that. Yeah. And I just love the world. It's just this fascinating world it creates, and we take it for granted because our generation, we've been spoiled with, you know, the world of Star Wars, the world of Star Trek, the world of Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and stuff. But it's extremely hard to create these worlds, and this has got to be one of the more detailed ones. And you just feel it at every level. You feel it in the writing, you feel it in the history, and as we've talked about, this is one of the harder movies to make on screen, whether it's building the buildings and making the costumes and stuff, and just so much effort was put into literally the chainmail they wear in this. They didn't like any of the ones that they made before because they don't look good on screen. So they got miles and miles of copper and they sliced it into little pieces. And there's these guys who spent a year and a half by hand putting together the chainmails. And that's just one of those facts that just stuck with me. And obviously most people will never know that, but it's that attention to detail that I think just comes across at a small and a big level. Again, there's a weird parallel, but it reminds me of one of the things with Steve Jobs, is that he insisted that the insides of the computers needed to look good and be well organized and stuff. And even though people said, but no one's going to see that, and he said, doesn't matter, we'll know. And it's all about culture, about if you're organizing the stuff that people don't see well, then you're going to have a well-run operation. And, you know, it reminded me almost of the Manhattan Project for the nuclear bomb. The amount, obviously it wasn't the same scale in terms of money and people, but just the thousands, they had 26,000 extras involved in making this, thousands of crew who dedicated their lives to making this. And it just comes across at every level. And it's just it's a work of art.
Completely.
This movie. Well, I think there's no better way to end it on that. So, Frosty, I'm going to thank you for doing the first of 3 episodes on the Lord of the Rings, and we'll see you maybe in a few months to do the Two Towers.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
And thank you for your patience, everyone. Remember to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to the channel, and remember, if you want to enter our draw for the 4K box set of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, make sure to subscribe and comment. We'll be doing a draw in about 2 months after this video is posted, and we'll reach out to the winner on YouTube to give you your prize. But thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.